The Canadian Cancer Society is trying to dig themselves out of a hole, a front hole.
A grizzly bear attack has left 22 sheep dead. That's quite a body count.
Hot dog eating champ goes vegan. Now he's the champion of being disqualified.
And did we leave the Babylon Bee or did the Babylon Bee leave us? Today, me and Adam are going to talk about why we did this show.
Whoa there, buddy. Let's talk it down a notch. This is the Talk Down.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Yenser, and I once hiked Mount Baldy on a first date.
I did on that on a second date, actually.
Really? It's an intense hike.
I'm Ethan Nicolle, and I once worked as a trap boy in a skeet shooting range. You know what that is?
A trap boy? Is that some trans thing?
You know what a skeet shooting is? Trap boy.
Isn't there
How dare
something
you.
about a trap? Like, no, I know
It
what
does sound
I know what skeet shooting is.
It sounds like the gimp, like a little boy that gets taken around
a trap
on a
boy
chain.
sounds like something you pick up in Thailand. No, I don't know I know what a skeet shooting range is.
So you know, the skeet is like the little discs that shoot out the clay pigeons. Well, down in that little hole, there's a machine. Somebody has to sit there and load them in one at a time.
Oh, man.
It's like a grueling summer job.
Really?
So we'll talk more about that during the subscriber portion, tell our stories.
If only there was a way I could make another dirty joke out of the word skeet.
I'm sure you have
But
plenty.
there's no way.
There's no way.
All right.
Perfect. Well, hey, we are on the very special 7th episode of
Yes.
the Talk Down. It's the only 7th episode we're ever going to do.
Yeah, this is our first and last 7th episode.
Lap it
We
up.
got a few new segments this week.
Yeah, we're going to try some new this week. First of all, we're going to try doing what we like to call a catch down because we don't get caught up. We get caught down on the Talk Down.
Talk down, get caught up.
So how was your week?
My week was pretty good. I had a great show at the Improv last Monday. It was a lot of fun.
Were you like a sex slave or something? Sorry, I'm just trying to get you back.
No, I don't think it works that way.
Oh.
Sex slaves don't improvise.
Were you like a
They have
Thai-
everything written ahead of time.
Oh.
No, I was at the Hollywood Improv doing stand up. It was a fun show, and then I know you were gonna come.
Yeah, we were
your
gonna come.
Your son got sick, so Patrick came.
Yeah, I gave Patrick my ticket.
Oh, it was a blast. It was such a fun show. But you missed a good show, and then you also missed. My girlfriend got mad at Patrick after the show.
Oh, really?
Because we were trying
For
to think
laughing
of
so loud?
No, everybody loves Patrick's laugh. We were all looking for a place to go and get drinks and hang out after the show, and some of us wanted food. And so we went back to Sherman Oaks, and we were going to go to On the 30, this bar there, but it was closed. And then Patrick suggested Mr. Furley's, which is across the street.
Okay.
Have you ever been to Mr. Furley's?
No, I've not even.
It
Sounds like a Taiwanese sex slave place.
You're going to keep going back to that. The food's very mediocre. It's all right. It's got kind of a college bar vibe. The Woodman, where we went the other week, that's the best bar in Sherman Oaks. Yeah. But Mr. Furley's, their food, they have this strict rule where it's no substitutions. Like they have a bar food menu. You cannot change anything. And my girlfriend ordered a burger and she said, "Can I get it without the bun?" And they said, "No." And she goes, can't you just not put the bun on it? And the server goes, "No, our kitchen is very finicky." So then we couldn't get a burger without the bun. So then she's like, "All right, I'll take it off myself." We get all of our food served and she asked for a fork and knife. And they go, "We don't have forks and knives here." They have a full menu, and they don't have forks and knives.
That's like their thing?
Yeah. And by this point, she had a little drink, and she said she was going to get mad at Patrick when he got there. And I go, "Don't get mad at Patrick." She goes, "No, I'm going to get mad at him, but it's going to be cute."
Okay. Was it cute?
Yeah.
Patrick can,
Patrick's a great guy.
Yeah.
He's a good laugher.
He can be, you just don't want to hurt his feelings.
Yeah.
You don't want that laughter to turn to weeping.
Yeah, exactly.
If he weeps as hard as he laughs. It's frightening.
How was your week?
Yeah. I went to SeaWorld, so with with two of my kids in life. So yeah, it went like that.
Now is the big I think I've maybe been to SeaWorld in Florida years ago. Is there a SeaWorld in Florida?
I have no idea.
I think there was at one point. I don't think I've been to the one in San Diego.
I assume there's already a copy of everything in Florida.
Yeah.
In Orlando.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's just, they got like the whale shows and the dolphin shows. But for the most part, these shows are like a lady talking in a wetsuit, just talking about like all the facts about, the sea.
Yeah.
And dolphins, they live
killer
to be
whale.
this long or whatever. And then they swim by now and then. But it It's not as great as I don't know. It's a little overblown.
Really?
Yeah. I'm over dolphins. I think
You're over dolphins?
Yeah, I think I'm over it.
I like seeing a dolphin in the wild. Like I like at the beach
it's
when you see
exciting.
them hopping by.
Yeah. My kids loved it. So
Did they still tell you the thing? I think it was from Free Willy where the whale's like fin curves over because it's in captivity or something.
that's
because they're
she
sad.
told us that was a lie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that just has to do with like different ages and different breeds and different.
Of course they'd say that.
Yeah.
They'd go, our whales aren't really sad.
Yeah, they're all fine.
That's
That was
just a
not
myth.
sad. It's just
That means it's happy.
droopy dorsal fin.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, before you start making jokes about erect dorsal fins,
No,
let's move on.
I would never. Although I was talking to somebody this week, I was joking about, I don't have the nerve to do this. I just think it'd be funny to walk up to a fat celebrity with a picture of a whale and say, oh, can you sign this? And he said it's a picture of a whale, like Shamu or something.
Wow.
You know,
I can't wait till I get famous.
I gotta
for
commit.
That.
I gotta commit to that bit at some point.
Let's talk down the week's top news.
Our top story: Canadian Cancer Society apologizes for saying cervix instead of front hole. This is a true story. This stuff always sounds like it's made up, but this is a real thing. The Canadian Cancer Society, one of Canada's top cancer charities, has issued an official apology for using the word cervix instead of the trans-friendly front hole. The nonprofit said that many non-binary people and transgender men have mixed feelings or feel distanced from the term cervix. We recognize that many trans men and non-binary people may have mixed feelings. It says you may prefer other words such as front hole. We recognize the limitations of the words we've used while also acknowledging the need for simplicity. Another reason we use words like cervix is to normalize the reality that men can have these body parts too, but they can't.
Wait.
The charity also highlighted ways that trans, non-binary, and gender diverse people face significant barriers when accessing healthcare, including transphobia, discrimination, and limited knowledge from healthcare providers. Limited knowledge, for instance, not realizing that a man can now have a cervix.
It sounds like they did these people a real discervix.
Yeah, really? It sounds like whoever wrote this had their head up their back hole. It makes no sense though. So I guess now I didn't know that the term cervix is apparently offensive. You have to just call it.
That front hole was
I
nice.
thought cervix was part of that. Like the whole thing is not. It's the whole thing's not the cervix. I could front.
I have
hole,
to look up a chart, but I think it's one of the things inside the whole thing.
but I don't feel like that. Like front hole is like we're adults.
front
Like
hole
we're
feels really
adults. Like the vagina
oversimplified.
is the whole thing, but then there's parts to it. I don't know that you would say the cervix is the front hole, but I guess now you have to say instead of cervical cancer, front holular cancer.
And what do you?
And then rectal cancer can be back holular cancer. And then breast cancer can be cancer, the old chest feeders.
Or titular cancer.
Titular cancer. But I don't know. I can't believe anybody was really upset about this because I can't imagine being more upset that your doctor said cervix than that he said you have cancer. Like,
hold on a second.
Your relative comes out of the room like crying.
What did you say?
What happened? Oh, terrible news. He said cervix and I have cancer.
It sounds like, and then front hole sounds like if like one of those rolled doll books, like the Stupids or whatever, like it's like, and they're doing like an anatomy lesson and they just point to a vagina and they're like, front hole.
But
who?
We live
thinks
in the
that's a better
dumbest,
term.
We live in the dumbest time that even like a cancer charity, people that are invested in
these are
medical
professionals.
Research and science and biology would say something as dumb as front hole. All right, enough of this unholiness.
Well, it's hard to quantify the amount of death and destruction that the Canadian Cancer Society caused when they forgot to use the term front hole. But with these grizzly bears, we know exactly what the damage was. 22 dead. In bear news, grizzly bear attack leaves 22 sheep dead. It's quite a lot of sheep.
That's a lot of sheep.
I'm kind of blown away by this. In the early morning hours of Monday last week, a grizzly bear and her 2 cubs broke into a sheep pen on a farm at the Spring Point Hutterite colony near Brockett, Alberta, in Canada. They walked upon a grisly crime scene. In the wake of the attack, 17 sheep and 5 lambs were killed. That's 22 in total. That's like 7 apiece. We got like a mother and 2 kids. I'm guessing the mom had more.
That's like an Old Testament sacrifice when the whole village would sin.
Yeah.
It's like we
Yeah,
need
I'm sure there's
17 sheep.
villages-
Get us 17 sheep and 5 lambs.
That's like killing all of the, who are those God hates,
Don't say the F word.
God hates F words.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the slur. You mean the Westboro Baptist
yeah.
Church
That's like if the entire Westboro Baptist Church body got killed by bears. Mike Walter, who's apparently a guy, said he had to put down several badly injured sheep attacked by bears who had climbed over a 4-foot fence to access the corral. So that's Canadian healthcare, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It was euthanasia.
I'll give you that one.
I don't know who wrote it. I didn't write it.
That one's solid.
It was a good one. Officers were able to trap the sow and one of her cubs, who were going to be relocated to an area with less farmland. One of the cubs still hasn't been found, so he's just out there like all binged out on sheep. The financial loss of the attack is nearly $10,000, but will be paid for by the province. So that's nice. But you know,
Do you think do you think they fell asleep while they were counting does it work if the sheep are dead? They're like, 1, 2,
counting the
3,
body
and they
count.
fall asleep.
You mean the cops?
Counting dead sheep.
The cops are out there counting them. They keep
And they just
passing
keep
out.
falling. They can't finish the count because they keep
Yeah, they're
falling
counting
asleep.
in Canadian. 1, 2. How do you say count?
Canadian's the same language.
Yeah, they like say they say like hoos. They say hoos and a boot and stuff.
Oh yeah.
What the boot those? I fell asleep. I don't know. Anyway, well, all I can say is that in the cops, they said they estimate it would have been so much worse had this attack been carried out by a strange man and his 2 cubs. So all we can say is thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank God for that. You know, it could have been so much worse, and everybody's okay except for the 22 sheep that are dead. Anyway, 22 sheep, isn't that like how many virgins an Islamic guy gets if he martyrs himself?
72.
Well, this mother and her children are about to find out.
Hmm.
Islamic court news. A Christian mother and her children were ordered by a court to convert to Islam. In a controversial ruling, an Iraqi court has decreed that a Christian mother, Elvin Joseph, along with her 3 children, convert to Islam. The decision was based on the interpretation of Iraq's personal status law, which mandates that children must adopt Islam if one of their parents converts. Joseph, a resident of Duhok in Kurdistan, found herself entangled in this legal predicament following the revelation of her mother's conversion to Islam after her divorce and subsequent remarriage to a Muslim man. So her mom got divorced and married a Muslim. So this all just had a chain effect.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a word? Chain effect? That feels wrong.
The chain reaction.
Chain reaction.
Yeah.
That's it. Butterfly effect.
Yes.
I am a Christian, Joseph asserted in an interview with Rudal Media. I'm married to a Christian man. I have 3 Christian kids. My education was in our language. All my official documents are Christian. Our marriage is registered by the church. Just, come on. Semi Petros, which is her husband, elaborated on the situation during an encounter at the National Identity Card Office. At that office, they said your mother-in-law had converted to Islam, and therefore they said your wife should become Muslim too. This also applies to my children. Their religion should be changed from Christianity to Islam. So wild. Can you imagine if like your mother-in-law, I mean, you don't have one yet, but when you have a mother-in-law, she just suddenly joins some cult or something or becomes a Mormon
And decides
and
that
all of a sudden like there's this ruling from the state.
you have to now be that too.
Or like your wife and all her kids have to become. The weird thing is like, I guess because it's her mom, they don't tell the dad he has to, right? It sounds like just like the dad, Joseph's husband.
Maybe the dad gets to keep being a Christian.
Yeah, he can be a Christian, but his whole brood.
I don't know. I'm just caught up on, I didn't know, is Elvin a woman's name?
Apparently Elvin is her name.
Because Elvin was the guy on the Cosby Show. He was like,
was it?
One of Denise's boyfriends was Elvin.
Isn't
Jeffrey
that-
Owens. That was the actor that played him.
Isn't that a Lord of the Rings character or something?
Elvin.
No, it's a language.
I think it's an adjective describing
Elvin.
elf things.
Elvin is Elvis's lesser known brother. I don't know if this is what Jesus was talking about in Luke 12:53. They will be divided, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law.
But that's crazy.
never know.
That's crazy that in those countries, a court can just order you to change your religion.
Right.
And they'd never do it the other way. They'd never be
know.
like, oh,
Wait a minute.
your mother-in-law is Christian. Now you have to stop being Muslim. I think the court only works in favor of Islam there. I think.
And like, they're not too hard on the dad. Like, we know. Yeah, you make your own choices.
Yeah.
Women and children, you do what we tell you.
Well, now that we covered Iraq, let's cover another place that we've bombed. Japan.
In Japanese dating news, Japan has launched a dating app to boost the birth rate. In a new effort to counteract Japan's rapidly declining birth rate, the Tokyo metropolitan government plans to launch a dating app as early as this summer. Announced by a government official, the unusual move is part of a broader initiative to encourage marriage and family formation among the city's residents, a response to the country's shrinking population. I don't know if this is a joke by Asians being short or not. But, in true bureaucracy-loving government fashion, the registration process for the app is expected to be lengthy. Users are going to need to submit documents proving they are single. They provide tax certificates to verify their salary, offer up 15 other pieces of personal information such as height, occupation, attend an interview in person to verify their identity. They'll even need to confirm that they aren't looking for anything casual, signing a pledge that promises that they are seeking a marriage partner. I'm really curious what the document proving you are single would entail. Like
This actually sounds like a good dating app, though, as far as dating apps go. If you have to actually prove that you're, that you're single, prove that you're looking for marriage, prove your income, prove your height, verify your identity.
Yeah, no catfish.
This is what all the other dating sites are missing.
My guilty pleasure lately has been watching Catfish. Have you watched much of that show?
No, I was hoping you were saying my guilty pleasure lately has been dating apps.
Dating apps, yeah. Well,
no,
I
have not been watching Catfish.
Not have in the past.
Yeah, I haven't.
The people are shockingly dumb.
Yeah,
like the people of the show. It's just it's so fascinating.
It is so fascinating that people fall for that stuff.
And the guys that do the show aren't anything. They're just normal guys.
Yeah.
Now maybe they offer the Catfish person money to be on camera. I'm guessing they do. That's literally all they have over them. They're like everything they do to research and figure out this person's fake.
Yeah.
Anybody could do it with any bit of sense.
It's weird because when I only tried the dating apps briefly, like during the pandemic, it was hard to date because you couldn't go out and socialize. So I tried them for a couple months. I suspected every person I matched with was a catfish. Like my premise is always this, I have to prove that this person isn't a catfish. Right. Because I just assume
especially
from the
a free dating app
that they're all fake.
Yeah. I did eHarmony. And I found my wife in eHarmony, so plugged to eHarmony.
Nice.
It's expensive a bit.
Yeah.
For a dating app at the time. I mean, I don't know how they do it now, but that weeds people out a bit. eHarmony was kind of the dating app for people that want to get married. So, because there's this really long, extensive thing you got to fill out. And anyway, me and Adam had a chicken before the show, and I'm burping it up now.
Gross.
Anyway, projections indicate that if current trends continue, Japan's population, more than 125 million people at the moment, could fall to 87 million by 2060, with 40% of them being over the age of 65. So kind of what China's running into too. It isn't just births that are falling either. The health ministry recently released data also showing that the number of marriages fell by 6% last year. So I think the big issue, I know this is happening in China as well, that the younger generations just don't even get the point of why get married.
Yeah.
Just pursue a professional career and like make lots of money.
That's a problem all over the world. I feel like even here, they're delaying marriage to pursue careers. The birth rate's falling all over the world. And I don't think people, because the world hasn't really faced it before, there were people writing about this for decades, that this was going to be a problem. Right. And I don't think people really considered the fact that you do need to sustain a certain population to keep a country going in a sustainable direction.
Yeah, the ramifications of having that many older people to take care of. I feel like it's happening everywhere because nobody can actually defend what marriage is or explain why it's uniquely special, right? Because we're always having to go, heterosexual marriage with the kids or whatever your flavor is. Maybe you like what guy, maybe like three guys.
It's lost some of its spiritual significance that was important. It's lost a lot of
it's more like one of a fetishes. Like it's a menu of fetishes and this is your thing you're into.
And because of the move is that like feminism and stuff that sort of push this, you can put off marriage and you don't need to have kids. And there's even these messages now that you're happier without kids and stuff like that. Right. And there's no more cultural pressure on people to get married, really. And then I know that there's also a lot of men that are becoming resentful towards marriage because of the legal system, the way divorce works and custody works and the financial consequences. A lot of men are looking at it like, is this even a beneficial thing for me to like enter into?
Right. We're in a brave new world.
Yeah.
Japan's going to solve it.
Japan's fixing it. Like they're smart. They fix everything.
Well, if they succeed in raising the population, that's going to be hard on the environment. Luckily for us, one unlikely hero is doing something about that.
In environmental news, Coldplay says they've beaten their own target for cutting carbon emissions at their live show. In 2019, Coldplay frontman Chris Martin announced that the band was putting touring on hold while they figure out how to make their performances more environmentally friendly. So they now say they have surpassed their own target for cutting carbon emissions for live shows. Maybe because nobody comes to see Coldplay anymore. The crowds are dwindling. The achievement is partly down to audience participation, which has seen fans producing energy by jumping up and down on kinetic dance floors and cycling on specially modified bikes. That sounds horrible. Like not only do you have to listen to Coldplay, you have to exercise while you do it.
What?
I guess they have a dance floor that generates electricity or something when you step on it.
Where's the bikes? They have bikes?
Because
I didn't read that part. Kinetic dance floor. Oh, cycling on specially modified bikes. What?
Because you generate a lot of kinetic energy.
But like at a show, the fans are on bikes.
Yeah, I think that's what it means.
That's so
and
weird.
And I love working out and just jumping and dancing around to, and it was all yellow.
Yeah.
It was all yellow. The band also promised to plant a tree for every single ticket sold for their shows. This has led them to produce 59% less emissions than their previous stadium tour. The show is powered by a system that runs entirely on recycled batteries and diverts 72% of the waste away from landfills. So the only garbage being produced at their concert is their music.
That's good.
I didn't realize Chris Martin was so worried about climate change. Maybe that's why he broke up with Gwyneth Paltrow, because her vagina candles were causing too many emissions.
Yeah.
Her front hole candles.
Frontal
They
candles.
smell like her front hole.
I think they're also worried about having to change their name eventually to Warm Play.
Because of global warming.
Yeah.
I do anti-Coldplay jokes in my stand-up act sometimes, and the audience gets more offended than any other jokes that I do.
Really?
I get more oohs off of when I bash Coldplay. I'll do political jokes, I'll do abortion jokes, and then I bash Coldplay, and they go, "Oh,
too far, mate."
Oh, that's the line. It's also convenient that they put touring on hold in 2019 right before the pandemic. Chris Martin knew. I hear there's a big hole in the ozone layer over Lizzo's concert due to her emissions.
Gross.
This is burning right through all the layers.
Yeah, she'd have a lot more work to do.
Yeah,
to pull off what Coldplay's doing here.
You know what I bet Lizzo would like? Hot dogs.
Hot dog news.
Nathan's hot dog eating champ Joey Chestnut banned from this year's competition for partnership with a vegan hot dog brand. Joey Chestnut, we all know him. He's won the Nathan's hot dog eating contest's mustard yellow belt 16 times and set the world record by eating 76 hot dogs in 10 minutes. He's been banned from this year's competition. First, that's a weird prize. I feel like the last thing you would want after eating 76 hot dogs is a belt.
Right. You want like belt scissors.
The pants are already
the
tied
jaws
up.
Of life, right?
He was banned after he signed an endorsement deal with Impossible Foods to promote plant-based hot dogs. Apparently, some people give up meat but still want hot dogs. The company said, "We are devastated to learn that Joey Chestnut has chosen to represent a rival brand that sells plant-based hot dogs rather than competing in 2024. Nathan's famous 4th of July hot dog eating contest is sponsored by the Major League Eating Organization. They said in a statement, "Joey Chestnut is an American hero. We hope that he returns when he is not representing a rival brand."
He was an American hero, and he could be one eventually again.
That's a bold statement. He's an American hero. It's so disgusting, those competitions.
I know.
They put it in a bun and they break it in half and dip it in water and then just shove it in their mouth.
Do they eat buns with them?
They have to eat the bun. That's part of the rules.
Oh, I thought they just slide hot dogs in.
No,
Or maybe there's a different contest.
You thought they just slide hot dogs in like a trap boy.
Yeah, like a trap boy slide. How dare you? Like if Dr. Furley or whatever.
Mr. Furley.
But I could have swore there's like hot dog contests where they just like slide.
There might be one where they just slide in, but
it's basically like replacing your intestine with
I think
intestine.
I think the rules at this one, from watching, you have to consume the hot dog and the bun. Now you can eat it any way you want. So what they do, it's real gross. They grab a bun and a hot dog and they dip the bun in water because it
That's
like makes it
nasty.
easier to swallow.
Yeah, but-
And then they just like break it in half and shove it in their mouth. It's
Is it hot dog
horrible
water?
to watch. Yeah. So and then they do this contest every 4th of July, and then afterwards the contestants head to the bathroom where the real fireworks start.
So hot dogs are made from like all the grossest stuff in
Mm-hmm.
the animal. So what is like a vegan hot dog made of like
I don't know.
the roots and the bugs and stuff that nobody wants from the plants? I don't get what a vegan hot dog
Yeah, I
is.
don't either.
It's an impossible hot dog.
It's an impossible hot dog, and hot dogs are already kind of impossible.
I know.
All the stuff that's in them.
You don't want to know what's in it, but at least there's no meat. We'll tell you that. We'll tell you that much. There's still probably some tires in there. Well, anyway, maybe Joey Chestnut is shoving vegan hot dogs down his throat now, but we're shoving something else even better down your throat. Little promotion for the show.
Time for our mid-show promo.
Yeah, we like to feature a YouTube comment or two each week. This week we got Tom Hammond 89. He said, "This podcast was the primary reason for me converting to Catholicism. Thank you so much for all your work."
Neither of us Catholic, but
No,
yeah,
that might have been Patrick's laughing. Patrick's
maybe.
Catholic.
Yeah. Now that he's converted to Catholicism, a court's going to order him to convert to Islam.
His children.
Here's one from Poultry Princess Glam. I just have to say I have missed Ethan's way of smiling sadly or sadly smiling. So glad you're back.
Do I smile sadly?
No. I
No,
smile.
I feel like I look sad now that I'm smiling.
I feel like I smile sadly when you make puns.
I can only think of that, what's his name? Harold? Oh, Hide the Pain Harold?
I don't. Oh yes, that meme.
The meme guy? Which he said that's just his
That
smile
is like
too,
a
I think.
painful smile.
Yeah, but that's just his smile. Maybe I have a little bit of that.
yeah.
And we have one podcast review on Apple Podcasts. The headline, "So Funny," 5 stars from Janahi 89. Whatever. Did you love the Babylon Bee podcast in its infancy days? If so, you'll love this podcast. When Ethan left the Babylon Bee, its podcast became bland. Until Adam joined, their timeline's a little off. And then one day, Adam was gone and it was bland again. Now they've combined their funny powers to create the perfect podcast.
The perfect podcast.
I laughed my head off again.
That's
So,
really nice. Thanks.
Yeah, that's really
Janahi
nice. Your
89.
timeline's a little off because Adam was on with me.
But it was a very brief
It was
period.
gradual, yeah, because you'd fill in from, well, you're behind the scenes a lot for a while when I was there. You
Yeah.
helped write the podcast.
Yeah, and I'd come on
And then you'd
occasionally.
fill in now and
yeah.
then, especially the more Kyle stopped being on, which has got to be more and more.
Yeah.
Especially during Go to Disneyland season, he'd be gone a lot.
But thankfully, comedic genius Kyle Mann is on all the time now.
He's all the time. I don't keep
Yeah.
track. But yeah, so we work together a lot at the Babylon Bee, but
Yeah.
more behind the scenes, and always enjoyed being on the show together.
And no, and I always thought we had good chemistry.
Yeah, me
on
too.
There, and now this podcast has proven we don't.
Yeah, it was a thing. It was a thing for a while, and now we just kind of we're phoning it in now.
But we're so glad people are enjoying it. Please make sure to like and subscribe and leave us a comment or a review.
Please do. It helps us a lot.
Yeah.
We need it, and we appreciate everybody who's doing
keeps
it.
us going.
And now we're going to try some new segments this week.
Yes.
We're changing up our format a little bit.
Yeah, we got a few new surprises.
Here's our first new segment.
It's time for This Week in History. There was a monumentous anniversary this week. I believe it was June 4th, I think, was the 20th anniversary of KILLDOZER. Now, do you know the KILLDOZER story?
I saw, was it Netflix or somebody did a documentary about it? Yeah, it's fascinating.
So on this date in history, it marked the 20th anniversary of the KILLDOZER. If you don't know this story, it's a little long, but it's very interesting. This guy, Marvin John Heemeyer, a muffler shop owner from Granby, Colorado, became entangled in numerous conflicts with town officials and his neighbors. One of the issues revolved around gambling. Heemeyer was a passionate supporter of gambling legalization and would hand out flyers promoting the issue. He once almost came to blows with a local reporter who opposed the proposal. Then in 1992, he bought 2 acres of land for $42,000 that he intended to lease to a friend to build an auto body shop. However, after purchasing the land, he found out it had a rudimentary sewage storage system that the previous owners put in by burying a cement mixer. So their entire sewage system was a buried cement mixer that the sewage would just...
They just poo into an old cement mixer.
It was buried in the ground.
Mixing,
and the city said that he would have...
Keeping it soft?
Yeah, it's still, churning it up. And the city obviously said that he had to upgrade the sewage system if he wanted to lease this property. And he found out that it would have cost twice the $42,000 purchase price. He called it extortion by government fiat. So then he tried to ignore them and tried to develop the land himself and opened a muffler shop on the property. And while this was happening, the land around it was bought up by a neighbor's concrete business. And they wanted
I remember really didn't like this concrete business.
This is what pissed him off. He was already mad about many things. The gambling, the sewage, the concrete cement mixer full
the guy who did this had a lot of
sewage.
Stuff going on.
There's a lot going on in his life. And now this concrete plant owned by his neighbor, they're buying up land around him, and they want to buy his piece of land so they can build this big plant there. And he asked them for $250,000. Then he keeps raising the price to $450,000.
So they say yes, then he upped it again?
Yeah, they would negotiate for a while, and then he'd up it again. So instead, eventually, they gave up and bought another neighboring property and began construction on the plant. Then he sued them, saying that their plant construction would block access to his auto body shop. And he took them in court and went in front of the city council. And the zoning commission and the judge sided against him. They said it wouldn't block it. They also started fining him regularly for the sewage backups that were caused by his cement mixer sewage system. And now this is where the story gets...
He was pooing a lot, too, because it's just it. Who else pooing in there?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe you ever go to an auto body shop and have to poo while you're there?
Yeah, that's not pretty... Yeah, it's true.
I got to go use the old cement mixer. Then this is where the story gets exciting. In 2002, after all this rage is building and all these problems with his neighbors in the town, he bought a Komatsu bulldozer at auction in California for $16,000 and had it shipped back to Granby, which is a beautiful city, by the way. It's a beautiful city in the Rocky Mountains.
You've been to Granby?
Oh, it's lovely.
Okay.
It's right by Rocky Mountain National Park.
Okay.
He had it shipped to Granby to resell. When it failed to sell, he took it as a sign from God that he had to, quote, start his mission. He leased a nearby building, changed the locks.
I love the idea of him sitting there loud and clear, God.
Yes, this is the mission he got because the bulldozer wouldn't sell. He bought a nearby building, changed the locks, enclosed it with additional walls, and he disappeared for a while, telling friends he had some work to finish. Over the next 2 years, he spent most of his time living in the building with this bulldozer. He built living quarters in there, and people rarely saw him. He put steel armor plating around the cabin, engine block, and treads. He installed several video cameras protected by bulletproof glass connected to monitors on the dashboard. He installed compressed air cannons to blow dust and dirt away from the cameras while he was operating it.
Everything.
He installed a makeshift air conditioning system to keep him cool inside because it was enclosed in all this metal armor.
Enclosed.
And he installed 3 gun ports for various rifles, and the gun ports were protected by steel plates. Jeez. He then sealed himself inside, and at 2:15 p.m. on June 4th began his rampage.
And what was that moment?
First, he drove the KILLDOZER through Mountain Peak Concrete, the company owned by his neighbor and rival Cody Donchev. Several employees tried to stop the bulldozer by jamming objects in the treads and firing a pistol at it, but they had no effect. One even tried to engage the bulldozer with a front end loader, but failed to stop it.
Jeez.
Sheriffs began to show up and fired rounds at the bulldozer. It couldn't penetrate the armor.
He was ready.
Yeah, it took years of planning for this.
Yeah.
And then he's just
how long did it take again?
And it was on the news. It was just...
I remember it was over a year, right?
Yeah, 2 years. Roughly 2 years of building and planning.
He never once... I wonder if there's any downtime where he kind of was like, I shouldn't do it. He took a month off. He's like, no, I'm doing it.
And he was pretty secretive about it. I wonder if anyone ever was in there. And I remember walking around there. I thought the guy there was... what's that? The big armored bulldozer.
There was a way that he covered it up when he had people come in.
Yeah.
And there's this corner.
Well,
I thought I remember to talk about that.
I know he built additional walls in this building he leased, so it was like part of it was sealed off from the rest, from the rest of the building.
There's a giant spot where there should be a room.
Yeah. After the concrete plant, he headed onto Agate Avenue and headed towards town. Officers used a reverse 911 call to all residents to initiate evacuations because they wanted to warn everybody. Yeah, it was the police calling everyone to tell them there's this armored KILLDOZER on the loose. Undersheriff Glenn Traynor climbed on top of the bulldozer and, quote, rode it like a bronc buster.
Undersheriff?
Yeah.
That sounds like whatever you were talking
Trap
about earlier.
boy.
Yeah, trap boy.
He's not
You're
the
a
top
sheriff,
sheriff. He's a bottom sheriff.
sheriff.
He also dropped a flashbang grenade down the bulldozer's exhaust pipe with no effect and had to jump down to avoid debris.
Jeez.
Heemeyer then advanced on Granby Town Hall, which had been hosting a story hour for children in its library. At least it wasn't a drag queen story hour, am I right?
Yes.
They were able to evacuate the occupants moments before he reached the building.
I mean, he was going pretty slow.
And
he watched the video. He's slow.
And he damaged and leveled a lot of these buildings.
Yeah,
it was moving very slow, but yeah.
He had a big carbon footprint.
He did. Chris Martin would not be happy with him.
He undid everything Coldplay tried to accomplish.
He then headed to Liberty Savings Bank, where he aimed at the corner office of a woman who was part of the zoning board work. Police were unable to damage the bulldozer, so instead they followed the dozer, jogging alongside of it en masse. This was all on
Just
TV, like an amazing car chase.
Helpless, right?
He then knocked over several street fixtures, such as trees and traffic lights, before moving to the office of the local newspaper and the homes of the Thompson family and their workplace. A scraper, like another piece of heavy equipment.
The Thompsons are some uppity up people that he didn't like.
Yeah. He had all sorts of little bitter rivalries
he probably
with
had
all
a whole
these
map.
people in town. Finally, after rampaging through a propane storage yard where he fired several times at the transformers and tanks trying to make them explode, he attacked the Gamble's store because the owner of it had been involved in the hearings. The store had a small basement on the property, and when he drove over the building, a tread from the bulldozer fell into the basement, and it got stuck, and the radiator got damaged. And with his KILLDOZER disabled, he killed himself with a single gunshot inside the cabin. Thus came the end of the KILLDOZER rampage. And it's a lot of people still joke and, talk about it, because on one hand, some people see him as sort of like an anti-government folk hero because they point out that he didn't kill anybody. He damaged property and buildings, but there is a lot of evidence that he was trying to hurt people. Like he fired at these propane tanks and stuff. And he did things that could have very easily.
He did some things right, some things wrong.
Yeah, that's anytime you build a KILLDOZER, you're going to do some things right and some things wrong. But I always loved his quotes. They found writings.
I was there like all these tapes.
He had all these tapes describing it. He had all these writings.
He talked the whole time he was making.
Yes, describing it and justifying
why
himself and saying what he was doing. And the two of his quotes that have lived on was, "I was always willing to be reasonable until I had to be unreasonable. And sometimes reasonable men must do unreasonable things."
Can argue with that.
That was This Week in History, the KILLDOZER.
KILLDOZER. If you're, you can watch I'm sure there's YouTube videos in there. I think there's a Netflix doc or something, but it's great. And I mean, it's terrible what he did, but it's also fascinating. It's nice to be able to enjoy something crazy a guy did and nobody died.
Obviously, it's sad that he took his own life, that he was disturbed in that way. Right. But it does make it easier to joke about that nobody was killed.
And everybody has that what if. Like, what's yours? Like, what's the job that you hated the most? Where you like, if you had two years to
what's going to drive me to build my KILLDOZER?
Like, I was a dishwasher.
Speaking of which, let's talk about our time at the Bee.
Oh yeah. Okay, we'll get to that. Let's talk about our time at the Bee. That's a great. That supersedes my dishwasher story.
No, I want to hear the dishwasher story.
Not only that, when I finally quit, because I was a dishwasher at this all-you-can-eat buffet where like truck drivers ate 900 plates of food. It was just like the gluttonous, I mean, look at me. But that's where I'm from. The town I'm from is called Coos Bay, and is actually apparently mentioned on David Letterman.
Oh, really?
He did apparently this is just a folklore on the town that he goes, a random fact, the fattest city in America, Coos Bay, Oregon. And he just throws the card. Anyway, so may or may not be from the fattest city. So I worked at the most popular buffet in the area.
I was going to say, you worked at an all-you-can-eat buffet
and I was
in the fattest city in America.
So I got really good at dishwashing. Like I could do the whole thing where like you hold this whole stack wow. And I was trying to work my way up, but they kept on putting people above me. Mm-hmm. And I started finding out they were on shifts where they would normally hire two people. If I was on, they'd only have me on because I could do the work of two guys. All this stuff where actually I was working against me to be like a good employee.
And some of the people could eat the meal of three guys.
So I wrote a poem in rhyme to my boss where I called him Adolf Hitler.
Oh, wow.
Because they'd make us basically signed this document that we were willing to work on holidays willingly, even though it was clear we'd lose our job. We didn't do it.
Hitler made that.
Christmas,
Hitler made people sign
exactly like Hitler.
Yeah.
So I made this whole silly but mean poem for him and walked out.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was so funny that I wrote a poem
so you're
just like KILLDOZER.
Your KILLDOZER is a poem.
Yeah, it's a poem. If I'd had 2 years, I would have done way more than that. It's like, 2 hours. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the bee, because we get this question a lot. We both have a history of the Babylon Bee. Some people are like, oh, why'd you leave the bee? And some people know that we were both let go.
Yeah.
Under different circumstances. So I wanted to talk about why we chose to make this podcast, what happened with the bee, what we're trying to do, what we're not trying to do. I thought it'd be interesting just kind of talk about it. So, so my bee story, how I became part of the Babylon Bee, for people that don't know, I originally was, I was working in Hollywood. I was working on VeggieTales, Axe Cop, my show at Fox. And I started seeing this thing pop up, the Babylon Bee, and it was sort of my like secret pleasure, like my what do you call it, guilty pleasure, your secret, sort of my alter ego. I started messaging them. I could never get a hold of them.
This was your guilty pleasure before Catfish shows.
Yeah, before watching Catfish. Yeah. So I finally got a hold of Kyle on Twitter at the time. He was a fan of Axe Cop, and I was a fan of the Babylon Bee, and I finally was able to get some headlines pitched. It was really hard to get a hold of these guys, and so I tried sending messages on Facebook and stuff. But I sent them like 30 headlines, and they actually used, I think, like 10 of them, which I now know is a really good batting average for anybody who's pitched headlines to Babylon Bee. I did pretty good. So, and then also I could Photoshop. So I kind of became this guy who was regularly doing stories and Photoshops for the Bee. So kind of in secret, because I was still a little bit afraid to admit publicly that I was conservative too much, even though I was still publicly friends with Doug Tenaple and stuff. And it was pretty much out there for anybody who wanted to like really look it up. But, and then when I really needed a job, the Babylon Bee, Seth Dillon bought the Babylon Bee, and he started kind of monetizing things and making it a place that actually hire people. And I was right after Kyle, I was the next person to be hired. That came on. They're like, "What title do you want? Just pick one." So I was like, "All right, creative director," because that seemed to be the next one down from editor in chief.
Nice.
So it was me and Kyle in his garage, working on the Bee. Remember, it was a wild moment. We were working in his garage and we were watching them talk about the Babylon Bee.
You looked behind a wall and there was an armored bulldozer being used.
What's under that giant blanket? Yeah. We were watching the Senate floor, I think, or the Congress or whatever, talking about the Babylon Bee from his garage. Like, we wrote this right here. Yeah. So weird. We're just sitting in a garage. It's hot. So the podcast was from the very beginning. I was just begging, like, we got to do a podcast. We got to do a podcast. So
the podcast was your idea to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think they knew they wanted to do a podcast, but like, I'm the one who like said, this is the equipment we got to get. I started recording it. I edited it. I made it happen. Like, it was just like, because for me, it was a passion. And I was excited. I was excited to use the Bee as a brand to make something. And I was excited about who we could talk to. I was excited to interview. I never saw myself as a podcaster. But it was kind of like, well, who's going to do it? Me and Kyle are the only two guys in the work for the Babylon Bee. Technically, we had a writers group in Facebook. A lot of guys that pitched headlines.
How big was the writers group at that time? Do you remember?
It's always around. I mean, I can't remember the exact number, but the people that contribute headlines is usually around 15 to 18.
But you guys were pretty much the only ones like working in person, right?
We were the only actual paid employees. The guys who pitch in the headline form, I think mostly it's for fun, or we do a little payment here and there. Yeah. And then I think Seth might have had some other people working on more of the business side of things in Florida. So anyway, the Bee grew fast, and I think, without getting too deep into it, my journey to losing my job at the Bee, a lot happened, and I think it was I there 2 years, 3 years? I can't remember exactly how long it was even going on, but it was around 2 or 3 years. And in that time, we went from our very first episode of a podcast in a garage to interviewing Elon Musk together. Yeah.
Which is amazing. They must have wanted to keep you around for all of your success and hard work.
We built the YouTube channel up. We started doing these sketches, animation. In 1 year, I think we did something like, somewhere in the realm of like, I think we did almost 50 animated shorts and 100 something podcasts and sketch videos and stuff. The numbers were crazy. We were just churning stuff out. Everybody was working out of their passion. It was just like, it was like a golden age at the Babylon Bee. That's when you came on.
That was the real golden age.
I got in trouble for hiring you.
No. You got in trouble for hiring me?
Yeah, do you remember? I told you about this.
I don't know if I...
The only way that I got in trouble in the sense, so I had this conversation with Kyle and Seth on the phone. So it was nowhere in writing, but I had said, I think Adam would be great. I would really want to get him on, and like they okayed it. And just like I had gotten other people on before. Yeah. It's always there's no real strong infrastructure built in there. And at that time, it always just kind of became like, well, I would just basically get the person to start working and then like say, send an invoice. Yeah. We'll just go from there. And then hopefully whoever gets the invoice will go, oh wait, we should change something and give them an actual, whatever it was. But the only way I knew how, because no one had ever told me how to do it. Yeah. And so, you were kind of like the last one where they're like, who hired Adam?
So they never wanted me there in the first place.
Yeah, in the first place, they're like, "What is this guy doing?" Yeah, I did have to.
Wow, they never wanted me there in the first place. Unbelievable.
I did have to I made my case.
That explains a lot.
I thought we needed you because I thought Adam looked at the news, writes jokes, headline after headline after headline. He's practiced. Like this is the kind of joke writing we need.
Yeah, maybe here's somebody who actually does comedy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they don't like that. So anyway, it's a long story. In fact, my Patreon, not to plug my Patreon, but I've gone over it a lot in my Patreon. So I assume a lot of early listeners here are from there, but gosh, so many different things happened. There's issues with like they were getting like, my pay had not risen with the Babylon Bees. In fact, a lot of the new guys coming on were getting paid more than me because they came in asking for what the job they were doing. I had started as a guy doing Photoshops, and my actual salary just didn't seem to match. So there's a lot of stuff, it's a lot. There's a lot to get into there. There's another thing where the Daily Wire offered me a job, and that seemed to really upset them. Part of what upset them about it, I think, is when we started the conversations about my income and I proposed what I thought I should be making, they seemed to think that was crazy. And then what the Daily Wire offered me was more than that. But the thing is, I was trying to stay at the Bee. Yeah. They were actually still going to pay me less than what the Daily Wire offered. And I was so in love with the team that I had there. But then one day out of the blue, and there's so much more to the story, like I said, but I don't want to spend the whole time talking about it. Seth and Kyle called me and just let me go. Like, it was like that. It was like, get everything out of the office. You're done, leave. And it was like, for me, that was like it was just such a shock. Like, I could not believe, like, we were not at a point where we couldn't work this out. It was just so shocked and so hurt. Cause like I had dumped so much time and energy into the Bee, and I just had it on good faith. I thought they're going to see it. Eventually it'll pay off. And, no, I just felt trash. It just felt so, and I'm not doing this segment to trash the Babylon Bee. I have so many friends there that I love. And, but it was, I think that a lot of it came down to the growing pains of a brand new company dealing with, working with, I hate the word talent, but like intellectual property and the kinds of, these deals don't look like when you hire a guy to, just do kind of a regular minimum wage job. Like, you're hiring a person who's creating intellectual property for you, intellectual content. That's a different looking deal. They never made those deals, and they never actually put anything into writing. And it started to come to a head where we're talking about making TV shows and movies. There's my animation that I'm doing. And we'd get into these conversations where I'm like, it's intellectual property. Like, we don't see any of it as intellectual property. I'm like, well, if people just copy these videos and use them, wouldn't you say that's your intellectual property? So we got into this whole thing about that. But it was just, I think they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And I think they've probably wised up a lot. I know that a lot of guys that are there now are getting paid better and stuff. But, and I don't think that they were trying to cheap out as much as like they were trying to keep up with what was happening, just happening fast. And I will say, one update I haven't talked about much publicly is that me and Seth
are having a baby
recently. Yeah.
No.
Me and Seth had a bit of a makeup conversation. Seth called me to apologize And he said, which I think is really true, if he had known me better at the time and we had better communication, this probably never would have happened. And I think that's true. I mean, there's a lot of dynamics there between Seth and Kyle and me and everything. But and it was heartbreaking with Kyle because Kyle was one of my best friends. He's a guy who for a period of time, I would have seen him as a guy who I would have made best man at my wedding. And I just never saw it coming that things would go like that with him.
That's tough.
But so how about you? How'd you start the band? I mean, we kind of talked about it.
You kind of helped me get in there. I had emailed Seth once or twice, because I was a fan of the Bee and their satire site, the headlines and stuff. And I'd been working on Ellen at the time, and I'd been at Conan before that. I had freelanced for Weekend Update, and I had always worked in Hollywood at these comedy shows, and I'd been doing stand-up. And I'd always do it from a conservative perspective when I was doing my own stand-up and my own writing.
Right.
But when I would do these, mainstream shows, I found success writing for them, but I could never get anything on that was, right-leaning or was, espousing more my values, And I liked that with a lot of the shows, I liked that they were very apolitical shows. Now, towards the end of my time at Ellen, it was during the whole George Floyd and 2020 pandemic stuff. The show started to get very heavily political in a very, in my opinion, divisive and nasty and often untrue.
Was that awkward for you?
Like,
because you're pretty. I always
very
you are
outspoken.
Vocal. Everyone knows you're conservative.
Yeah, I've never hidden the fact that I was conservative the whole time I was in Hollywood. And to the show's credit, and Ellen especially, when she found out I was conservative, there was a time when they were writing an article in Variety about conservatives working in Hollywood, and they wanted to interview me for it. And the producers were like, "Oh, we don't know if Ellen knows." I'll tell her, and they go, "No, we'll tell her." And then later in the day, I was like, "Did you talk to Ellen?" They go, "Yeah, she said she's glad there's somebody here with different points of view. Like, she had no problem with that at all." Now, I do think...
How long after that did you lose your job?
I didn't lose my job at Ellen. I decided to leave there one season before the show wound up ending because I had been there 10 years. I was kind of burned out creatively. I really enjoyed my time there. I loved the other writers. I liked working at Ellen. I'm really proud of a lot of the stuff I did there. But there's this point where you're just creatively kind of ready to move on and think what's the next thing for me? And like I said, there were things during 2020 with the pandemic. It became very, very, anti-Trump. It became very, very, we had the year before that we had Ellen/Elliot Page on crying about the Jussie Smollett thing and saying it was real when it obviously wasn't. Yeah. And there's never any apology. It's not like these people ever go, "Oh, it was a mistake to push this bullshit narrative." And then, there was the whole Stop Asian Hate thing that happened in 2020. Yeah. And of course, they had these two activists who came on and said that it's Trump's fault, it's the rhetoric of his followers. Even though if you look at the perpetrators of these Asian attacks, it was all inner city mentally ill homeless people, mostly people of color, and it had nothing to do with politics. It was just, there were these random attacks that had to do with poverty, it had to do with the environment in those areas, but they'd blame it, and they would just push these political narratives. And I kind of got burned out there because they became very hostile towards having anyone on from the other side. I would often encourage them. I would often encourage them, bring on guests from the other, you don't have to agree with them, but bring on conservative people and talk to them. And it was especially the producers were kind of against that, but it was mostly just that I was creatively kind of ready to move on. And so I left the Ellen show, and right around, I think it was during my final season there, through a mutual friend of ours or some people.
Yes, Erica Rhodes told me that comedian.
Oh, Erica's great. Yeah, Erica's a hilarious comedian.
I couldn't believe she said yes to being on her show.
She's great.
Which was, that's been an eye-opener for me. I'm trying to, I don't want to interrupt your story.
No, not at all.
An eye-opener for me now working at the Daily Wire is people didn't react as negatively when I mentioned I worked at the Babylon Bee. And even on the left or generally, the perception of them still is not that they're hard right. And the general perception is they're just that comedy site.
Yeah.
They're getting away with murder. Because people don't even know. They're just, because Seth's just as hard right as anybody. I mean, he's like what? Just your, I think Babylon Bee is founded by guys it's Seth Dillon and
Adam Ford originally,
and both of these guys, well, especially Adam Ford. I think Adam Ford's fantasy is not to do comedy. His fantasy is to be like Hannity, Like he wants to be like a guy wearing an American flag hat, telling everybody America's ending. We got to stop these libs. And it was like he saw the tool of the onion, how they could make the right look absurd with headlines, and he goes, "We got to do that to the libs."
Yeah,
it's like I started picking up like, oh, that's what these guys. They've never thought about. There was just always this like divide between the people that wanted to. We got to change America, people, which I'm on board with wanting to change America, obviously, but then the people that are pure comedy people.
Yeah. And so, then you brought me on as a comedy guest, just talk about my comedy and sit in on the podcast.
You were a guest.
And the day that I was there to be a guest on the podcast, we also shot a sketch. It was that.
Was that the same day?
It was conservatives only have one joke.
Yeah.
Or two jokes, or whatever it is. It was the AOC is dumb and blank identifies as blank.
Yeah, we're trying to write a third joke or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was comparing the two different writing rooms.
Yeah.
And that was the day that Matt, the guy you might hear laughing back there. So we're sitting there recording this thing, and all of a sudden Kyle keeps getting phone calls from Seth. And you can hear Seth's voice nonstop
for like 2 hours.
Yeah, and Kyle's pacing like a beaten dog, just like nonstop pacing out in the yard, like, yeah. And he has to only say things of agreement and just nonstop. We're waiting. It took seriously over 2 hours. He's just talking about Matt in there based on a 5-10 minute conversation or something that they had. And it was, that was like to me, I saw that as the beginning of the end. Like all of a sudden, like Matt just got gone. He just got gone. Like he just, and I was so embarrassed because it was our first time having you around, and we're all just sitting there, this whole ordeal, waiting and waiting. I was like, wow, maybe I had been in denial up to that point, but like there was some dysfunction going on.
Well, I mean, from being on shoots before, there's a lot of sitting around and waiting. I don't think I noticed anything out of the ordinary.
Okay,
yes, that's just how shoots. It's just how shoots
and there probably
go.
is a lot of dysfunction in any entertainment related field.
Yeah. I've never gone on any shoot where someone's not in the other room yelling at someone over the phone. And then a few months after that, I started touring around doing stand-up that summer, and I forget where I was. I was sitting in some like random parking lot in the middle of America, and my phone rang, and it was in like August or September, and it was you, and you were like, "Hey, this is Ethan from the Babylon Bee. We liked having you on in the spring. I know you're not doing anything right now. If you were... or I'd like left Ellen, and you asked if I'd want to be like kind of freelance contribute both headlines and help write like sketches and develop more of the video content. And so then I said, absolutely. And I started coming in on sort of a freelance basis. I would come in, once or twice a week. I'd pitch sketches. From my experience at Conan I was a segment producer's assistant there. So I helped produce like the guest interview segments. So I kind of when we would have guests on the Babylon Bee podcast, sometimes I'd try to call them, do a little pre-interview with them, like, write up some notes to kind of work on that. And I loved, obviously, like pitching and writing sketches.
Yeah.
And so then I was freelance, but it was becoming more and more regular. And then, I don't know if you know this, but their old podcast host got fired.
I heard about that. Suddenly out of nowhere.
And then I became like, I got the offer to kind of come on full time then. And I started, guest hosting the podcast with Kyle and the other people that were kind of rotating around there. But mostly I was pitching headlines. And then I was also writing a lot of the sketches at the time. So did that for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then,
so I gave you when I was gone, you were, your job, the seat filled up.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
So you got busier. Did you actually get like a regular pay at that point?
Yeah. I was brought on like
you got an actual contract. What I've been trying to get.
They gave me what you were asking for. No,
probably. Yeah. You probably got the contract that they were like, finally, because that was the thing. I've never signed anything. The Babylon Bee. So weird that I'd be, and I think that's one thing they regret. They wish that they had me sign some NDA or something, I'm sure. But, and I'm not out to ruin them. I want to say that. Like, I'm telling my story.
They're free to make whatever choices they want.
They can say they
agree with them.
Exactly. I'm sure you're under some contracts, so you can't say that. But also, I'm not.
So here's what I will say. I'll just give you the facts of what happened leading up to my time. I was there for 2 years. Wrote a lot of sketches. I love doing the weekly news segment. I would have always liked to see them and I would like this in all of right-wing media. It seems like the people in charge, they all want to do comedy and they just don't get how to do it. They do it okay on some things. They get it okay
They want to use it.
But it's always like, it reminded me of what you were saying about Adam Ford. It's like they want to be the Hannity, or like, I always think of like a Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
Where he was very message driven.
I only use Rush Limbaugh because he's more clever. I think Rush Limbaugh actually understands comedy.
Well, hold on. This is what I was saying about him. He gets how to be sort of funny and entertaining.
Right.
But it's not in a way that's going to be broadly comedic to the whole country. It's very message driven. It appeals to the base. You know, it reminds me of like the...
It's Crowder. Crowder has that too, I think.
But this is all of what right-wing media does. It's always like a Crowder.
It has to be a
or
preacher.
An Alex Stein.
Yeah, it has to be a message.
Or, you know, it's always someone who is only popular with right-wing social media. It's never people that are just broadly successful in comedy as sketch writers, as monologue writers, as comedians, as comic performers. That's what the left has always done. And even if you can argue that some of those shows have lost their way, or, you know, a lot of people on the right like to complain that they've become too political, like Colbert or Kimmel. Colbert and Kimmel, if you don't like them now, they're accomplished, funny comedians. They have a body of work that is undeniably funny to everybody. And the right always seems to just pick.
I know. The right's starting point
they always pick
is
failed
where they are
comedians.
now.
Yes, exactly. The right starts where the left sort of fell to, and they'll criticize the left, but then I don't see them grow beyond that very much. Yeah. So I very much wanted to write. You know, I like writing sketches that have a conservative point of view, but hopefully have strong enough jokes that they're funny to everybody.
Right.
I very much would have liked to, you know, see them or any right wing media work into developing a more broadly appealing late night style comedy show that puts comedy first, and kind of the politics is there, but it's, you know, it's secondary to just the comedy of it. Yeah. I was having a good time writing, you know, sketches there. They came up with this other project that they wanted to work on for a while. And I said, I don't mind working on this for a while, but I don't want to be, if the whole B becomes this project, that's not really, you know, my thing. And so for a while they were doing both sketches and the podcast. And then around October or so, they decided they wanted to stop doing weekly news, which was my favorite thing to write. And then we did a subscriber, what do they call it? Like a subscriber lounge where people would like talk to us on the B platform.
Okay.
And one of the most liked comments was, we need more Yenser content. Can we get weekly news on here? So this was after they pulled. That was the most liked comment in the subscriber lounge. And then I worked on 4 consecutive videos in a row. So
you did subscriber exclusive?
Yeah. It was like something where you like, no, we never did it. The subscribers asked for it.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't want to do weekly news anymore. So then I was just writing sketches. Before I left, the last 4 consecutive videos that I worked on, it was the Biden Western. It was Biden's Price is Rising. There's one called like Woke Librarian. And then there was a sketch that I helped punch up and co-directed, but I didn't write it, which was the grandpa gets placed in the Senate.
Okay.
These 4 videos in a row all did extremely well. I think they're all above 800,000 views. And after those 4 videos, I got pulled into Kyle's office before even the last one was released.
Yeah.
And they just said, you know, you're being laid off.
Yeah.
So that's
like a pattern.
It's just
because I don't think I could have been at more of a peak when they let me go. Like we had just done the Musk interview. I had an amazing year for YouTube, a first year of YouTube content. I mean, like introducing all these different kinds of aspects of what the B could be. I mean, I know it was a lot of it was potential based, but like.
And in the time since then, and like it's now been like 6.5 months or since then, they've released like 40 videos, and like 2 of them have surpassed those last 4 consecutive ones. And one of my videos is now their top viewed video of all time. But it's just weird because they laid off Chandler around the same time. And it's like, you were like the most popular part of the podcast and they get rid of you. Chandler starred in the Californians Moved to Texas, their like most popular miniseries.
Right.
They get laid off. And then I write their most popular sketch of all time. They get laid off.
You would get the sense that they don't actually want to succeed in any other area but headlines.
I don't want to go that far.
No, that's the sense I would get. No,
like they're free to do what they want. It's just,
right.
It's frustrating.
That's the sense I would get.
The frustration I have with them is the frustration I have with all of right-wing media. It seems like they know how to do comedy for their base,
right?
But they don't get how to expand beyond that. And I have the experience where it's like, hey, I this is what I do. This is what I write. This is what I perform. And you know,
well, Yeah, it's a frustrating dichotomy, and it frustrates me when I watch comedy on, say, like HBO, or like I've been watching Hacks right now, which is like a really left wing show. It's definitely parts where it does get preachy.
Yeah,
I mean, it's about a super woke leftist liberal Hollywood girl with this old comedian, and she's definitely preaching to her throughout the show and like trying to convert her, and it's working, and it's annoying. It's like, okay, come on, like this doesn't feel real. But you can tell that most of these writers, even on the left, is one thing I respect about some of the people on the left, is that they still hold the craft above their message.
Yes, yeah.
Not all, obviously. There's some. It's always smells bad. You can always smell it when you're getting preached to, and I think that they have more integrity about their work, and so they are able to achieve things that are very genuine. And if preaching is always going to be the number one thing we have to do, it's always going to be some form of propaganda. If that's always the above all be all, and that was what we were told at the Babylon Bee, was basically that we were given the directive. Everything has to be a right-wing talking point that I can't remember the exact words, but the words were something like I remember Kyle sent it out. But it has to be an argument for make a case for something right-wing. It has to be a rah, rah, rah.
But I think that's part of that's their goal, their desire. And throughout all of right-wing media, I think what drives that also, all of these right-wing media companies, they evolved a lot out of social media. So their only metric is, did this get a lot of clicks on right-wing social media?
Right.
Within the echo chamber on right-wing media, did lots of people like this and watch it?
Right.
And again, if you go back to how the left started, it's like SNL didn't start as the Democrat comedy hour. The Daily Show didn't start out as the left-wing news. It was just funny to everybody. And you can work that messaging in. Like when I go out and do stand-up for crowds that are just mixed across the political spectrum, I always work in that I'm a Christian. I always work in that I'm conservative. But you have enough other content, that it's funny to everybody. And I don't think anyone in right-wing media has figured out how to do that, successfully on a larger scale. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what they want to do. That's fine. That's what they want to do. I think my frustration coming out, especially like I mentioned, like when I tell people Babylon Bee versus when I tell people Daily Wire, the perception of the Babylon Bee is like, they're that comedy website.
Yes,
There's a lot of people that just think it's a comedy website.
And a lot of people will see their headlines.
And I always thought the Babylon Bee could be a comedy brand, a strong comedy brand, just like National Lampoon or something that you could slap on all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And people just associate it with funny. And the power that they would have if they could go down that road. But there's there's an insularity that happens a lot on the right wing stuff, and fear of experimentation. I think that I was always trying to push for, I think, yes, do your bread and butter, do your rah, get the right going stuff, but can come up with like a percentage of leeway to where you can try some other things.
Yeah.
Stuff's going to fail. Some videos are going to fail. But that was always for me. That was the biggest contention for me, is like, I me when I was there, I was doing so many different things at one time. Yeah. And that was always my vision. But I had this whole other part in this segment I was going to do, but I'll save it for another. It's its own segment. Because, back when I was on the Babylon Bee, we did this crazy interview that we had to delete, and we could never air it. And I think I can talk about it now. So all right. Next episode, maybe I'll do it. We'll talk about it, because that. And we can talk about more of this in after the show if you want. And if you guys have questions about it, but we started this podcast, I think, just to kind of
I started this podcast because you said, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, what the hell else am I doing?"
Well, and I kept hearing the Babylon Bee quit doing their podcast.
Well, so this was,
but I guess it technically didn't.
I won't say anything like.
Not just from
I won't say anything that's not public.
That
was another thing that was frustrating. Is I was told, that they're moving towards this other project and that they're not doing the podcast. You weren't the only one who heard sketches.
I'm still friends with Babylon Bee people.
It's like they're still doing podcasts and sketches.
Yeah,
just who knows.
Yeah, so that was so I had heard somebody from inside say that the podcast is basically done. So I was like, huh. And I kept hearing the people talking about, the podcast is, they're not airing them anymore. Maybe they do it every once in a while. So that was one thing that and then me and you did my Patreon show. And for old time's sake, we did some news stories. And I was like, man, that was fun. It was like old times. Yeah.
In their defense, I don't think they ever stopped doing the podcast. Yeah, but they had cut back. I think they were not doing it as frequently. And
so I don't know how frequent it is now.
I don't know if they're going back to doing it frequently again.
We're not trying to steal their podcast. We're doing our own thing. We're not trying to ruin the
I want
Babylon
us to,
Bee.
like,
You can enjoy the Babylon
Use one
Bee.
of their graphics right now or something.
But anyway, that's our story so far.
Yeah.
Right now. And here we are doing our thing on the talk down. But yeah, there's a large part of for me doing this is just like, I loved making the podcast, the Babylon Bee. And
yeah, it was fun.
And so here we are, we're doing it. We're staying up till all hours of the night on Tuesdays and doing this. All right. So real quick, before we end the show here, I wanted to talk about, we kept making these, we're reviewing the Garfield movie. And Garfield kept saying he's this morbidly obese president, which the movie was all about that. Clearly they got it wrong. We had this comment from a guy named user Mel 90s. He said, hey, our fattest president was Taft. Garfield was the one who was shot and then had Alexander Graham Bell trying to metal detect the bullet in his abdomen until he died of infection. I hope maybe you'd realize the difference after publishing last video. You doubled down this week. Sorry for the obnoxious history lesson, but Garfield was a pretty cool guy who doesn't deserve the slander. So I'm like, oh man, you're right. We got to correct this. So yes, just want to make sure you guys know.
Taft was the stuck in the bathtub.
Taft was the fat guy in the bathtub. I don't know why this movie got it wrong. There's really stupid guys that make movies. But yeah, so just real quick, the President Garfield, he was only president for a very short time. But yeah, he got shot. He was the last log cabin president. He ate a lot of lasagna. He was rejected many times by the Universal Press Syndicate, but then eventually he became president. He took a strong stance on civil rights. He's a big civil rights guy, but he also really wanted to abolish the horrible institution of Mondays. And anyway, so one of his most famous quotes is, "Diet is die with a T." Did you know that?
I never heard
presidents,
him say that.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's President Garfield. He got shot. He's one of the few that you don't know about, like you don't hear about that much. So he got assassinated. But part of the reason he got assassinated is because like the doctors were like doing all this stuff with unclean tools in hand, and like he was alive for like 80 days.
Oh wow!
And a lot of people think he could have lived if it hadn't been for like medical
practice.
Yeah, just old timey medical stuff. So anyway. Sorry, President Garfield, for getting everything wrong about you. All right, well, that's the show for this week.
That's it.
I think that's the show.
That's a wrap on the.
There's
wrap up on the talk down.
We don't usually do movie. We've been doing movie reviews. There is a
We'll do that next week.
A Deaf Missions film, but I don't know. I thought it was weird because
I like how you're trying to fit in all
to
the segments real quick. Instead of saving segments so that we have content, you're trying to quick. It's not time sensitive. No one's heard of this movie.
I guess. Yeah, whatever.
And it's only a week. The movie will still be out, right?
But I always time it. The movie we review is coming out the next week, so it'll be out then. And then it will be a lie. Yeah, I guess you're. Nobody cares. It's a whole.
I'll let you try to.
I'm suppressing a cough.
We're at 3 hours and 40 minutes, but if you want to try to squeeze in,
it's a whole deaf Jesus
movie.
movie.
You want to try to squeeze in 6 more segments,
and everybody
as we fade to black.
Everybody's signing. Jesus is talking in sign language the whole movie. I want when he's on the cross and he's like, "My God, I'm just saying." Like, is he like? How's he doing?
We have a conservative Christian audience, and you're trying to quick fit in a Jesus dying on the cross joke.
Only signing. He'd have to talk in sign language before his hands are nailed down. It's just I'm really curious. Or supposed to retell. Yeah, I'm curious how they pulled it off. That's all I'm saying.
So you enjoyed the movie?
I love the movie. I need to learn sign language. I'd probably understand more, but I've read the Bible. Well, thanks everybody for joining us in this episode of the Talk Down. Matt McDavid back there laughing at us and working on setting all this up.
Yeah. Frank Fleming and Trevor Anderson,
who may or may not have contributed jokes. And Johnny Tutts probably did throw some in here too. Our contributors on Discord, our editors, Daniel States, Johnny Tutts, Will Rondi, Bard, some of the people that throw in help me edit the document.
And of course, Austin Robertson, the voice of the Talk Down.
Yes, and you guys, especially, most of all.
And to viewers like you.
Our listeners and viewers, thank you so much. And we're going to go into our downtime now. We're going to call it downtime. This is the Talk Down exclusive portion. We might talk a little more about some of the stuff we left out on our Babylon Bee stories. I got a bonus news story. And then I had some other stuff, but it was related to the thing I skipped over this week. So we'll talk about something.
I think we took up plenty of time this week.
Yes, we did. All right. Enjoy. This has been the longest episode of The Talk Down.
The Talk Down is filmed in a dark room in front of a couple of fake plants. For more information or to become a subscriber, go to thetalkdown.com.